These are always really tough segments to do. Whenever someone passes away in our Transformer world, I like to do these segments because I like to celebrate everything that they've done. And sometimes to let people know the stuff that they've done that people don't know about, and to kind of show their travels through life, because it's not really about the end, it's always about the journey. And the person we're talking about today was, in a lot of ways, for no better term, the top of the food chain in Hasbro, especially for anyone that obsessed with the Transformer brand after the turn of the century from 2000 to today. We're going to talk about the CEO of Hasbro, Brian D. Goldner, also known as Brian Goldner, who was the man all that time during the Transformer brand, and very important in a lot of ways that people just don't realize, especially if you really liked certain aspects of the Transformer brand and how he was the one who really brought that to the brand. But I want to go to the beginning first before we go to the end and talk about where it all started. You know, born April 21st, 1963, Brian loved advertising. He loved the hype life. And he went into the Leo Burnett advertising company. And that company is best known for, like, during the 80s and the early 90s, of the Pillsbury Doughboy, McDonald's, Green Giant, the Maytag repairman guy, doing that kind of advertising and finding those hooks that get, people interested in those products. McDonald's being the really big one with getting the attention of children and how that works, especially. And he was with them from the mid 80s up until just about almost the late 90s, until he joined in 1997 Bandai of America. And that was where a lot of Brian's know-how and what would affect Transformers would be forged. His first big success in Bandai was the Tamagotchi brand. And anyone who was around during that mid to late 90s know how much of a big deal those little digital pets and Tamagotchi were for Bandai. It was a phenomenon. It really was. And there was bootlegs and fakes and pretenders and everything of that came from the success of Tamagotchi. And while he was there also, he saw what was going on around that same time in the 90s of the Power Ranger brand, the Dragon Ball brand, and a little something else that would be coming that would also help. And when he finished his tenure there at that company in 2000, he would then move over to their rival of Hasbro. Now, the main reason why he was going to Hasbro was in 1999, the year before he joined the company, Hasbro had a brutal year. They lost over $144 million. Hundreds of people lost jobs, and the Kenner emblem within Hasbro, the Cincinnati office, was closed. We kind of covered a little bit of it in the Toy Armada with Aaron Archer in brief little parts. But essentially, he was brought in to kind of fix things up, and he was brought in initially for the Tiger Electronics sub-brand, and then later on the board game brands like Monopoly, and of course the most important one, Transformers. And he came in 2000, and he brought his own kind of unique view for the Transformers brand that was influenced from the very Japanese kind of culture from the Bandai side. Because he saw, like, just before he left in 1999, and this was mentioned in an old interview, how he saw how they were building up for this Gundam brand to be brought over to the West in 1999, which of course would later be Gundam Wing, and then everything would explode from there. But he also wasn't blind to what was going on with Pokemon and Dragon Ball, and Japanese anime was just the way to go. And thus, 2000 to 2001, we began with Car Robots, aka Robots in Disguise, being ported over to buy them time to then build the Unicron trilogy. Now, Aaron Archer did an interview where he talked about how the idea for the little mini cons and the gotta catch 'em all price point and, small, cheap Transformers was Brian's idea. So clearly the influence of Pokemon and stuff was so strong, and it was him that kind of kickstarted, dare I say, that price point, that faction, and the Unicron trilogy marching forward with that small little request to Aaron Archer and the creative crew. Obviously, the Unicron trilogy project, I guess we'll call it, was a success, along with all the other brands that he worked with at the time with Hasbro, and he got promoted in 2006 at the end of the Cybertron line to the Chief Operating Officer at Hasbro. Now, during that time, too, in 2003, he was also talking with Hollywood producers to try to save the G.I. Joe brand, and talking with the Hollywood producer, Lorenzo de Bonaventura, about, let's try to make a G.I. Joe movie, let's do a military-themed G.I. Joe movie. Then, of course, the war in Afghanistan happened, and everything with that craziness with Iraq in, 2003, 2004, wasn't really the right time to do a G.I. Joe movie. So that kind of fizzled out, but then luckily it shifted into, well, why don't we make a Transformer movie then? And we all know how that turned out ultimately in the end. Brian would end up being credited as the executive producer across Transformers 2007, Revenge of the Fallen, Dark of the Moon, Age of Extinction, The Last Night, the Bumblebee movie, and of course, you'll see his name in Rise of the Beasts. So he was a big part behind that. Of course, also the later G.I. Joe movies too. And it's a shame because, I get a feeling that that mind would have still been needed moving forward, because there's a lot of good stuff that came from 2000 to now. Obviously, it's debatable on different people and their opinions of different stuff of Transformers, but he brought a lot of unique takes that in a lot of ways did help the brand in a lot of ways, and through all that success moved his way up all the way to the top. That ivory tower. He became the CEO of Hasbro. And it was primarily because of all the success of the Transformer movies. And we all know how successful those were, especially in terms of monetary gain and making the brand more successful than it ever was in its entire lifetime up to that point. Now, to kind of get to where we are today, the cause of his death was never disclosed. But in 2014, he was battling prostate cancer. And it's kind of funny because, in 2013, one of my personal heroes, wrestler Bret Hart, was also dealing with his problems with prostate cancer in 2013. And he was such a shining example for a lot of people because, he started doing philanthropy with that and telling men who will listen, because it's Bret Hart, to go get themselves checked out after they're over 40. And, Brian's death is a reminder for all of us to do that. Get yourself checked out. If not for you, for your loved ones and your friends and your family. So I get a feeling that probably prostate cancer might have had something to do with it. We don't have an official cause of it. Essentially what happened is on October 10th, he stepped down from his role as CEO of Hasbro, and an intern went in his place. And then 2 days later, on October 12th, 2021, he passed away. Now, people were saying that the signs were kind of there because when he did a investment interview, I want to say it was 4 months ago, he didn't look too hot. Going back to wrestling again, I apologize for it, but I'm reminded of the late, great Dusty Rhodes, when, Dusty Rhodes was a very robust man, to put it nicely, very robust individual. And in the last 3 months of his life, before he just suddenly passed away, he was looking very gaunt and thin. And Brian clearly looked the same like that too. So clearly something was wrong. And it's a shame that we lost a very creative and talented individual, a good mind for the Transformer brand and for Hasbro as a whole. My condolences go to his wife, Barbara, and his daughter, Brooke. For people who don't know, his daughter, Brooke, actually was the voice of a female Decepticon in the 2015 Transformers Robots in Disguise series. She was Cyberwarp. So even his daughter has a little bit in the Transformer world too. But it is a shame, and it really sucks. And Hasbro right now is really going to try to pick up the pieces and figure out what they're going to have to do marching forward, because this is a big loss for the company. And, we'll see what happens. But again, it's never easy to talk about this kind of stuff. But I just kind of wanted to let you people know who he was, not just, a CEO of Hasbro, but who he was and what he did for the brand and how it reverberates and still will be marching forward. Years from now, we'll still be talking about mini-cons. And it really started from Brian's mind and what he saw when he was at Bandai. So a lot of cool stuff. And, people saw my little thing on Twitter. I tried to just give my 2 cents on what he did and how important that was. But I really wanted to do a separate segment too, because sometimes the limitations of Twitter is just not enough. It's just not enough. So rest in peace, Brian. You did some great work. And I really hope to probably get Aaron Archer and get his words too in the future on Toy Armada. We could talk about this too. But anyways, rest in peace, and all the best to the family and everything that's going on in this crazy world we live in today.